Welcome to this final afternoon. Thank you so much for coming over to enjoy the last couple of hours here with us. My name is Rona, and I am guiding you through the final afternoon here in the Cube. And we will start off with a very important topic. I think that has been touched on already a lot during the last 2 days, tackling disinformation, and Jenni Sargent is here from First Draft. She's the managing director, and First Draft is a non-profit trying to tackle disinformation through collaboration with different newsrooms, but Jenni will tell us all about it. And it's actually interesting, I said this a second ago to you, we had a session on this stage 2 days ago, and the presenter asked whether the audience would trust more in Alexa, Putin, or Trump, and actually Alexa was the most favorite, but I know that you disagree with that. So very much looking forward to hearing more from you now. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys so much for joining, and as you hear already, I'm speaking English, she will speak English, so the session will be in English, and I hope that is fine for everyone as well now in the audience, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, the stage is yours. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. I keep hearing that this is like the end of the or coming to the end of the conference and everyone's tired, so I'm going to try and do high energy. I've just had a delicious bratwurst, so I'm ready to go. I'm sorry I'm speaking in English. I think I'm going to stand over here. I can't see my next slide, so bear with me. Luckily, I know this topic pretty well. But thank you all for putting up with me speaking in English. I've got lots of interesting things to say, but only about 25 minutes to say them. So I'll try not to speak too quickly. If you don't understand, please do put your hand up, and I'll slow down. After all that, there we go. Maybe... I have to... Okay. Apparently, I have to stay over here. I'm already rebelling. So just very quickly, for those of you who don't know anything about First Draft, we were set up in 2015, and we effectively help journalists and anybody in the information space to tackle the challenges of this disinformation age. So anybody who is seeking to source information online and report information online, we are a non-profit set up to try and help with that. So we have online training materials on our website to help with verification and detection of any social media content. We also inform our work by research, so everything we do is thoroughly tested through research. We've also got sort of best practice guides and a big community of partners, which I will tell you all about coming up. Just to point out that if you are interested in verification, which is kind of where we start whenever we talk about this stuff, there's some really simple, straightforward techniques that literally everyone from your grandmother to your, the people who teach your children at school to the journalists in the room, everybody should master some of these verification basics, which is when you find information online, how on earth do you tell whether it's trustworthy? And there is a school of thought that says this is a really specialist area of expertise and it can take years of training, but actually 99% of information you see online, you'll be able to verify its credibility within about 30 seconds, sometimes just doing a simple reverse image search, for example. But we're not going to go into those details, but if you go onto our website, you can access this free online course. So we started back in 2015, and the reason I bring this slide up is because we're talking today about an initiative called CrossCheck, which is at its heart is about collaboration between multiple partners. And we started as a collaboration between 9 partners. Google News Lab kind of formed us as a group of experts who were working in this space and joined us as a founding partner. And we set out to tackle these challenges based around all of what we are calling eyewitness media that was becoming so prominent in our news feeds. There was a particularly busy year for eyewitness content that was surfacing on Twitter before any news photographer was even close to getting to the event. So all of a sudden, that transformed how we consumed news and how we reported news. So then we extended our network and we put a call out to any partners who were working in newsrooms and crucially technology companies and said, are you committed to taking action against this? Join us if you want to demonstrate the credibility of your own newsroom, of your own organization. And we instantly got around 80 partners. This was back in October 2016. And the challenge was for us all to begin to share our experiences and to share our knowledge and to find ways around this sort of growing epidemic of what we were seeing online, which was the original eyewitness footage. We started to find people who were pretending to be at newsworthy events and pretending to be victims of newsworthy events and pretending to be eyewitnesses. And so all of a sudden, the journalists were finding themselves having conversations and using content that was sourced online to inform their reporting. And it turned out to be wildly untrue. So between us, we started to think, what could we do? The first really big collaborative project we did around an election was called Election Land. It was with the amazing ProPublica, who are an investigative journalism outlet in the US. And we did it around one day, and the idea was that we were going to bring in students and journalists from across every state and start looking at the integrity of the election. So if anybody was tweeting that they were standing in a long line or a long queue waiting to vote, we were able to detect that to inform the journalists who could then go and stand at that voting booth and find out whether there was any deliberate delays in stopping people from voting. It was a really successful collaboration, but it was only one day. And it made us instantly realize that we needed to do more. So we came up with this model, which is this very early, apologies to anyone who is a designer in the room. This was our very early mock-up of what a CrossCheck project could be. And the idea was that we had a detection unit on one side, and this was every journalist in every participating newsroom within our partner network would start to monitor the social web, and then they would feed that into this sort of verification technology, which doesn't actually exist. There's no magic bullet to be able to say, we're just going to put this into the verification machine and it will come out true or false. That doesn't happen. There's a series of steps you have to take. And much of our work, if you heard me speak this morning, is about not duplicating that effort. It makes no sense for everybody in every newsroom to be doing exactly the same work. So we started to bring everyone together and say, okay, why don't you start sharing the evidence that you're collecting and the verification steps? Then the idea was to push it out and to provide the voting public with a trusted newsfeed of information. And we tested this in the lead up to the French election in 2017 with CrossCheck France. It was a really huge success because 37 competing newsrooms for the first time started to work together. So you'll see here all the logos. The idea of a CrossCheck report is a way to inform the public that these recognizable, trusted news brands all agree the same information. These news brands that normally compete, that normally don't share anything, started to not only share information, but they would publish at the same time to the same standards, which we'll come on to, and with the same conclusion of whether something was true or not. Since then, we developed this idea. We moved on to the Brazilian elections last year, and we finished Nigerian elections earlier this year. And these were all wonderful to be part of. Really, in every case, we've got research that suggests all of the journalists said that they were more careful, more accurate with their reporting because they were accountable to each other. So they had to demonstrate the verification steps they'd taken to their fellow peers and to their potential employers in other newsrooms. It just meant that everybody became better and more aware and raised skills within their newsroom that they didn't have. But then we had this challenge of how do we inform the public? And if you see here, we started to bring these logos in along the bottom, started to recognize that how we present this information was crucial. Again, this morning, I started talking about the trend at the moment is to put a big red fake sign across anything that has been identified as untrue. Well, one, it's very rarely possible to say if something's categorically 100% true or false. And the kind of nuance around this disinformation space really matters because if you want to convince somebody to change their mind, you can't just say it's false. You have to say why, and you have to demonstrate the evidence that you found. And so we started to kind of put these labels in. Sorry, this is in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. But we started to say things like, okay, well, it's false because, and here's a little explainer of why we reached that conclusion. And the same in Nigeria, we started to say, well, it's misleading, it's not false, and this is why we believe it's misleading, and here's all the newsroom logos that you know and trust who agree. Now imagine those of you who are either from the German media or consume German media, if all of your sort of trusted news organization logos were side by side. And imagine if those logos represented not just one side of the political argument, but also the other. Imagine if you could demonstrate the kind of balance and objectivity that we need to convince people. And imagine those logos sitting side by side. This is something that we wanted to keep going. But the most frustrating thing about these projects is that we kind of galvanize these newsrooms, we generate interest from the voting public. In Brazil, we have research that says that, I don't know what I have to do. There we go. In Brazil, we have research that says that 25% of the internet-using population recognized the brand Comprova, which was the name of the project, just because the newsrooms themselves amplified the work at the same time. So bear in mind, if you think we've got a great fact-checking project and we've done great work, well, nobody's going to find that work unless you use people who already have an existing audience, an existing reach, an existing influence. This is absolutely crucial to everything we do. The only reason 25% of the Brazilian internet population knew about this project was because all of these newsrooms and broadcasters and radio stations, online outlets, all published the same information, referenced Comprova, referenced the project, and it had huge impact. We even had some of the print outlets then took the visuals that we were making and putting it in a weekly digest of all the things that the public could begin to recognize. And in every case, every partner is required just to reference the project in their reporting in some ways. They would reference Comprova and say that that's how we found out what we know, and then the member of the public can click through and see the trail of evidence that's been collected. So, all of these partner logos, isn't that wonderful? But again, my frustration, once the Brazilian election was over, this great initiative ended. Once the Nigerian election was over, this great initiative ended. In France, it ended. And then we had all these newsroom partners, all these journalists had been trained up, the members of the public had begun to recognize these trusted brands, and nothing happened. So we started to think how we could connect everyone. So we have now created, now my colleague Tommy is in the audience, and we previously had created CrossCheck International, and Tommy has been convincing me that no one's ever going to use the international bit, and we should stick with CrossCheck. So I'm going to call it CrossCheck and hope that all of you can just call it CrossCheck and stop me saying the international bit that I'm now so used to saying. Because ultimately, the international bit's the bit that excites me, but from a branding point of view, it's boring, I get it. And so this is where we're working now. So the red dots are where we're starting to have bureaus, which are university partners who are hosting student newsrooms to help support these projects. So we are now working in New York and Sydney and Johannesburg, Buenos Aires, everywhere that is holding an election or has held an election. But most importantly, we don't want these projects to end after the election. So the idea is that we're now building this global community of journalists who are all trained to the same standards and who are all sharing information through one platform, which is also going to allow us to build a really exciting disinformation database for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. That can tell us an awful lot about patterns of behavior that we're seeing in one country that we also see in a different continent, and how the methods and tactics that we're seeing are employed. So those who were in the talk this morning, this is how we talk about it. It's a super newsroom. But we're also not cutting it off at journalists. We have civil society organizations involved. In terms of trust, anyone who is close enough to a topic is considered an expert. So imagine we did a cross-check around climate change. Imagine we did a cross-check around health. In Africa, in particular, this is something that we're working on. Because misinformation and disinformation doesn't begin and end with democracy and elections. There are, very active communities who are intent on spreading falsehoods and rumors around every topic. But in some cases, a breaking news desk isn't going to be the most credible expert to cross-check, to put their logo. But maybe UNICEF's logo might be credible. Maybe the World Health Organization's logo might be credible. So think what we can do if we start to connect specialists around the world. So just to talk you through how it works, it's very simple. The CrossCheck platform that we've designed means that journalists can work separately. We don't have a super newsroom in the literal sense. Everyone carries on and just logs in from their respective organizations. The only thing we can't do right now, because of the logo piece and because of the importance of protecting the credibility of the project, is we can't include people who are freelancers or bloggers, for example, and that brings up the great debate of what is and isn't a journalist and who is and is not credible. So we will, approach that in a moment. But effectively, anyone from their organization can log in, start a new investigation, which will send an alert to everybody else in the community to say, this is happening, this is what we're investigating. And this doesn't have to be a straightforward debunk. This could be an in-depth investigation, a story about local council plans. It could be anything. And if you're within that community and this story takes your interest, you can choose to follow that investigation. And once you follow it, you're joining in the debate and you're contributing to the discussions, sharing your information. This is a very simplified version, but a conclusion is reached. Once we have collected sufficient evidence to form a conclusion and be able to report, then we create these little cards and we put a conclusion and label it specifically as to whether it's manufactured or misleading or what context needs to be there to help the audience understand. And then it's these cards now in this new version, this new global version, that have the CrossCheck logos. So they're kind of similar to a Facebook-like. So you will see these embedded in news reports and in academic reports and anywhere where we have cross-checked and have a trail of evidence to demonstrate the veracity of the reporting, and then all the newsrooms who agree add their logo, their stamp of approval, their endorsement of the work that's been done. And then the audience can click through and read that trail of evidence and follow those verification steps. The report is published and embedded and is then shareable in its own right. I have to say, this is very, very early days for us. We've never built technology before. Don't ever build technology if you've never done it before. It's really hard. However, we're getting there, and we've got some great people working with us. So this is how it might look. We just did the project around the Spanish election called Comprobado, the snap election that threw all the journalists off with about a month to go. And this is an example of how El Confidencial did a report and then embedded the CrossCheck card with the newsrooms that agreed, and then the audience could follow. Benefits, blah, blah. I mean, it sounds like I'm giving you a pitch today. I kind of am, because I'm really proud of this, and I'm really proud of what it could be. But there does have to be a business incentive. There has to be a recognition that commercially, why should a newsroom sign up and start sharing information with a competitor? So as the CrossCheck team, centrally, as part of First Draft, we do our own monitoring. We find stories and feed them into the platform for you. We will kind of create regular weekly training sessions to improve all the skills in your newsroom. We'll be sending you alerts whenever we see something that's identified as a threat, but that we think you shouldn't actually report because it could amplify that falsehood. More on that in a moment. But this is difficult, and it's, to suddenly have a very engaged community, we need to set those standards, and we need to manage those standards and ensure the credibility of the project. So we kind of help you through that with our central support team. And the other way we do it is that we get all the journalists together in various retreat locations and make them sing karaoke and drink. Works every time. So this was in Paris, and that kicked off CrossCheck France. This was in Brazil. The reason I've shown you quite, a dry version of the Nigerian one isn't because there wasn't a party. It was because the party involved dancing, and I was very much part of that dancing. So every photograph has got a picture of me dancing in a horrible way. So this is a much more responsible photo to share. So I've got about 6 minutes, I think. So I'm just going to race through to leave you with some food for thought, because I talked about the trumpet of amplification this morning, and the challenge, I'll quickly reference it for those of you who weren't there, but the challenge of how much of this disinformation starts right in the weeds of the anonymous web on those closed platforms like Discord and some of the forums that you have to declare your identity and your allegiances to enter, and then it breaks through to conspiracy communities, which is kind of your YouTube and Reddit, where people are really wildly speculating. Then it breaks through to Twitter and Facebook. Then journalists tend to pick it up and publish it. So it's either a debunk or they're promoting the fact that it exists, and the responsibility involved in reporting this is crucial. So in my last 3 minutes, I'm going to give you a case study for some food for thought. This is Emma Gonzalez. She was a prominent figure after the Parkland shooting in the US. And she is seen here ripping up a Target to demonstrate her support of gun laws a couple of weeks after the attack. This was a collaboration with Teen Vogue, and she's clearly ripping up a Target. Now, you probably can't read much of this, but when Teen Vogue tweeted it, somebody replied, "What's next?" The video of them ripping up the Constitution. And the suggestion there is, well, if she's ripping up gun control, she may as well rip up the Constitution of the US. And that kind of suggested, by us tracking some of this language, that's one of the flags to us that suggests this could be something that is going to go viral or is going to get picked up. You definitely can't read this, so let me read it for you. This is a screenshot from 4chan. And it says at the top there, "Your mission should you choose to accept it." And the mission was, this user had photoshopped, instead of her ripping up the Target, she ripped up the Constitution. And he photoshopped that, and he set a challenge to the community on 4chan and said, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to get this picked up and to go viral. On Vote, V-O-A-T, another platform where this is ripe, somebody said, "WTF, is this real?" of her ripping up the Constitution. Someone replies, "To be honest, I pinched it from 4chan, so it could be fake, but even if it is a fake image, her words have been real enough to make it an accurate representation." Exactly what I was talking about this morning. If it confirms your beliefs, you don't really care if it's true, you're just going to amplify it anyway. So the challenge was set, and then Gab, the glorious free speech network, as they call themselves, tweeted the fake version of Emma Gonzalez ripping up the Constitution. But bear in mind here, at this stage, it's got about 1,987 retweets, so, you know, a lot. But in the grand scheme of things, would we call this viral? Would we say it had reached everybody? Because at this point, it got debunked pretty quickly by the digital editor of Teen Vogue, who came out and said, no, this isn't true. This was a photo shoot. I can verify. But the minions on 4chan went out and did their bit. And there were tweets and tweets and tweets of the ripping up the Constitution. But look, 2 retweets, 4 likes, 7 retweets. These people don't have influence. They might be part of a coordinated strategic campaign, but they don't have any friends. So they can try as hard as they like, but it doesn't actually have the success. However, the news media do have friends, and they do have influence. And it was just a little bit too tempting for any news desk to resist a debunk when you could have the words Gonzalez, Parkland, shooting, and fake in the headline. That is just like SEO gold. So, and I don't mean to be dismissive here, because actually, debunks are important, fact-checking is important, this stuff is important, but it's complicated. So everyone started to debunk this. Even Elle, a fashion magazine, got in on the act. I mean, that's great. Surely we all just think, well, that means that we've reached as far as we want to reach. But ultimately, had it reached a tipping point? Because now, if you Google Emma Gonzalez, you're much more likely to see that fake image due to the amplification of the newsrooms doing the debunk than you would ever have seen, because that guy on 4chan set a challenge and said, we want to get this to go viral. And it worked. In that trumpet of amplification, it started off down here, and it ended up in mainstream media. They achieved their goal, but in a different way. So I'm going to leave it there. It's slightly different to the CrossCheck idea, but I wanted to show you the kind of reasons that collaboration is useful, because this is a discussion that newsrooms need to have together. This is something that you can collectively share your experiences, your ideas. Sometimes you just need to talk this stuff through because there's no easy answer. So as part of the CrossCheck network, we're hoping to help those discussions and to start to devise standards that help all newsrooms cover this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we won't have time for questions. We have to swap immediately to the next sessions. But thank you so much, Jenni, for coming, presenting, and for your fight against the fake news. And give us 2 minutes now. We will just swap around for the next presentation on Instagram. It will be quite a change now. But yeah, a round of applause again for Jenni. And you might be around for a couple of minutes as well to take questions in the back. So anyone who has a question, just grab Jenni and take your chance. Thank you so much.